look up about him yourself online. I think it would do much justice for you to actually watch his past lectures and past talks. So I'm just going to hand over to him now, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Qala rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good evening to all of you. Just to follow up with what Professor Zainal mentioned just now, the importance of altruism in our academic pursuit. The Prophet ﷺ narrated a hadith, Khairun nas anfa'uhum linnas. It's very beautiful kalam, where the Prophet said, the best of men is those who are beneficial to other men. So this is actually a very simple calling which the Prophet entrusted to all of humankind. Nas, not mu'min alone, yeah? Everyone on this earth, everyone on the anak Adam lah. So in what we are doing today, I guess is part of that. I hope, inshallah, with our intention, if our intention is correct, we are going to get the blessing from the Prophet in this respect. So I'm not sure why I'm being given a special slot at the end of the session. I was supposed to be just like all of you guys presented earlier, but maybe because of the nature of the topic could be political, and being political now is something that is very much celebrated in Malaysia. I'm not sure about that, but I'm here not to speak as a politician. Neither I'm representing Bersatu or Tun Mahathir. I'm here as a student of King's College London, finishing my postgraduate masters in geopolitics. So the question of look is policy. I would divide my sharing in three parts. First, I would share my views about the previous look is policy, the 1.0 version. Secondly, I would like to elaborate a little bit, sketch to you the panorama of the global politics nowadays. And finally, I would give my own crystal ball about what would Tun Mahathir speak this coming Monday. The session will be this Monday. So what is this look is policy? How best can we view it from a very intellectual viewpoint? I would like to make use of Tun Mahathir's persona as the guiding, the arbiter of this discussion. Tun Mahathir can be viewed, with respect to look is policy, can be viewed in two kind of personalities. The first one is about, there was a talk given by Tun Mahathir at Magic, the one that where Najib set up for Obama to came and give all the startup thing about Malaysia. People ask him, who are your role models in your leadership as a prime minister? He gave three answers, three persons in the history of great statesmen. The first one is, surprisingly to me, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That was the first one he mentioned. To me. When people ask about I rarely heard about this from Tun Mahathir himself, even though I always speak with him. So he gave his justification that he viewed Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as a social reformer, someone who managed to transform the Arabs from the Jahili period to what they were before, the glory days of Islam. So, look is policy can be viewed from this angle, in the sense that Tun Mahathir was actually responding to the Malays of the Malays. How can he, as a prime minister then, being an ultra-Malay nationalist, revive and restore the glory days of the Malays, which he found Tun Abdul Rahman then was too lenient, I must say. Yeah, that's why he responded against Abdul Rahman with respect to the race relation, with the economic policy. So Tun Mahathir Tun Mahathir's Look East policy can be viewed from this perspective. Meaning to say, it is a response or an antidote to his Malay dilemma. He wants to import the Japanese culture, work ethics, and transplant into Malay society, which I think not successful yet. Secondly, this Look East policy can be viewed from another role model of his, which is Peter the Great. Do you know who Peter the Great is? Yeah, he's the Putin of the bygone era. The guy who was responsible in reviving Russia to be a great power in Europe. One of the great stories of Peter the Great was he traveled across Europe, went to France, went to Britain, incognito, as a normal person. He studied the technology, the industry, the culture of European Enlightenment, and brought back those values and created this social engineering within the Russian kingdom. So, Look East policy from Peter the Great perspective of Tun Mahathir's role model is a pragmatic economic upscaling of Malaysia as well as for the Malays. Yeah, I remember when I read a memoir written by former CEO Hyundai and also the president of South Korea, Lee Myung-bak. In that memoir, President Lee mentioned how he became very close friend with Tun Mahathir when he was the deputy prime minister. Under Tun Hussein, Tun Mahathir was a very obedient deputy prime minister. He did not act like Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim did in the past, meaning to say he knows his place. Whatever proposal he proposed to the prime minister, Tun Hussein said no about Plus Highway, about Penang Bridge. He did not fight Tun Hussein at all. So, but during those periods, he was also the Minister of Trade. He befriended many of these tycoons from East Asia, Korea, from Japan. So during that period, he was already crystallizing his ideas about Look East policy. So once he became the prime minister, what he did was he gave all major contracts to these conglomerates from Korea, from Japan especially. So from these two lenses, we can understand that it is very much Tun Mahathir's vision of the Malays and for Malaysia. And we all know that Look East policy is not something reactionary. Meaning to say, when Tun Mahathir decided to buy British last, that kind of policy, boycotting the British or the Westerners, because Tun Mahathir, he is an anti-imperialist kind of leader. Till today, you can see when he was the prime minister, he created many platforms for third world leaders to have dialogue, like Langkawi Dialogue, for example, and for G2G for third world countries. So, Look East policy is also an attempt to put Malaysia at the global stage among the third world countries by trying to emulate the best the East could offer, which was then the Japanese. So basically, that's Look East policy from Tun Mahathir's point of view. But it was a very vague policy actually. There was no master plan. It was more like a slogan, like Trump, "Make America Great Again." So Look East policy. Then the Minister of Foreign Affairs, many of the personnel caught off guard. They said, because Tun Mahathir, the first thing he did after 6 months he was in office is to create this slogan called Look East policy. But the blueprint is within Tun Mahathir's mind. For example, later on, Tun Mahathir's style before, right? He was very dictatorial, authoritarian in a sense, positive sense. Yeah. When he decided to create Proton, almost all professors in Malaysian universities said no. It doesn't bring any economic sense for Malaysia to have our own national car industry. But he did it anyway. Yeah, my way or highway. So that's Tun Mahathir's policy. So during that period, he he also inaugurated this Malaysian National Industrialization Plan, where he invited a few Japanese policymakers or thinkers, like the famous one Kenichi Ome from McKinsey, the brainchild of multimedia super corridor. So Tun Mahathir was very much influenced by the Japanese. But when I asked one of Tun Mahathir's advisor, who used to work with him, actually Tun Mahathir was very pragmatic in the sense that if those days China was like Japan, maybe China might be our East. So the question later that I will answer in my crystal ball, would China be our East? Okay, before we can go to that, let us scan through the panorama of global geopolitics. I just received my copy of The Economist for this week. As you can see, when you talk about global geopolitics, there are two major players where you cannot avoid to speak about. First is the US. And when you talk about the US, you have to speak about Trump. And as you can see, The Economist here gave a very good summary of what US foreign policy is all about at the current moment. It is a wrecking ball. Yeah, it's a wrecking ball. Trump just bulldozed everyone, including its neighbor, Canada. You know? And when you talk about global geopolitics, you also cannot run away from the rising power, which is China. And many scholars, as I've been here for almost 1 year, I have attended many forums and lectures. In the West, there are two major countries that they are not against, but it's like when Malay talks about DAP. Yeah, the first one is China, and second is the Japanese. So the Russian. So these two countries will always be like a scapegoat for anything bad about the way the European Union manage their members, about UK foreign policy, and this is why when you want to understand Look's policy on what's coming up by Tun Mahathir, the environment that they will be operating will be within these two major actors. Last week, Mat Sabu went to Singapore for a Shangri-La dialogue. Of course, as reported by the media, our media, is all the popular stuff. Mat Sabu, the new, the Raya defense minister. You know, people take picture with him, but rarely mentioned or being discussed about the content or the tone of the discussion in Singapore, the Shangri-La dialogue. One of the major items of the conference is about how the US now has rebranded its Pacific strategy. We all know the US is a global power that has full spectrum dominance. Meaning to say, all over the world is their theater, defense theater. In Pacific, they have Pacific Command. Middle East, they have Middle East Command. Europe, they are the NATO. So last week, they rebranded their Pacific Command from PACOM to become Indo-PACOM, by including Indian Ocean as part of their theater. So now, after Obama pivot to Asia, under Trump, even though it is a wrecking ball foreign policy, it is basically, there's still rational or logical underpinning of US foreign policy, which is, again, in a very brute way to comment, a new containment against China and Russia. This has never lost its steam since Cold War period. The difference is, under current situation, China is no longer a peasant country. China is about to be the #1 world economy, coming to 2030. Yeah? And China, mind you, have a very strong national policy called Made in China 2035. What is it all about? It is about not buat factory macam biasa ni. It's about transforming China from a low-wage industry industrial-based country to become a high-tech, productive country. So just imagine, China would be a self-sufficient country where they would not be dependent on other countries for their high-tech productions. This will be a great disruption to Germany, to Japan, to Korea, who produce high-tech mechanism in creating products for the whole world. So it will greatly disrupt global trade in the future. That's why Trump retaliated using tariffs against China. It is actually a skirmishes, I must say, against China with respect to trade. So now, my crystal ball would be, what kind of look-east policy would Tun Mahathir propose for us and for Japan, at least? Some of the clues can be gleaned from a statement made by the Japanese ambassador to Malaysia, where he said 2 days ago, the look-east policy that the Japanese would expect for Tun Mahathir would be a broad-based one. Rather than just economic, it would be security as well. Okay, this is something which is very new to all of us actually, because Japanese under President Abe, they are promoting what he termed as the Quad, meaning to say a combination of 4 major countries in the Pacific: India, Australia, Japan, and the US. These are the 4 strategic diamonds where, well, actually it's about containing China again. So would Tun Mahathir, being an anti-imperialist, respond like what the Quad would want him to respond, meaning to say to be part of the US grand strategy in containing China? From my own personal view in my engagement with him, I don't think so. I don't think Tun Mahathir would be more warm to this kind of proposal. But knowing all too well, China is very much entrenched in our national politics and economy at the moment, as how it was unraveled for the past 1 month with regard to the YNB scandal and also the Chinese money being used to bail out some of the Najib's debt. Tun Mahathir might have not much choice except to latch on Japan and the East Asian countries to balance China's influence in Malaysia, economically speaking, not defensively. Because Tun Mahathir, in many of his speeches, he is not anti-China. He is very much pro-Asian values. So I don't think the look-east policy that will be proposed by Tun Mahathir would fall into a very belligerent kind, as expected by Western observers. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. Question?
So as we know that at least the time period for Tun Mahathir is 2 years in office at least. So do you think that upcoming pengganti will share the value as well? And if not, nanti setakat 2 years je, what will happen next?
If Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim will become the 8th Prime Minister, I doubt so. Anwar is very libertarian with regard to his foreign policy. He would not, although he wrote the book about the Asian Renaissance, right? But I don't think he would be like Tun Mahathir, meaning have a very resolute view about going to the East or championing Asia rising. I don't think so. But if Azmin were to be Prime Minister, which is a very speculative suggestion, he might be the one who going to continue Tun Mahathir's look-east policy. Why? Because he's now been given a very important task, the Ministry of Economic Affairs. Under that ministry is our so-called Malay Sogo Social. You know, GLC is actually, Malaysian is actually where we train Malay captain of industries. So Azmin has to oversee all the GLC to transform them and make them be a real competitor in a free market rather than being protected by government. So if Tun Mahathir foresee him as the natural successor to really carry forward the look-east policy, we can see a real continuity.
So during look-east 1.0, the context of ASEAN was that it's right in the middle of at the end of the Cold War. China wasn't emerging, was still emerging. ASEAN was very much functioning like what do you call that? What's the area? What's the name of the Bosnian states?
Yugoslavia.
Balkans, yes.
Balkans.
Something like the Balkans in the late 19th century. They showed the intermediaries in the Schröderian sense. So, but in Lokis 2.0 now, OBO has already seeped into Indo-China very, very much.
Yeah.
Philippines is literally pro-China now.
Yeah.
We literally only have Indonesia left, Singapore left, and Malaysia left. How can ASEAN Redux under Look East 2.0 move back to function as a working intermediary to balance against China, Japan, India, and the US? Because it's a hotspot. Any spark might just turn into the Balkans 2.0.
You're right. Thank you, Shao. You're right. Actually, I forgot to highlight to you that the Indo-Pacific strategy of US at present is actually to contain China's maritime one belt, one road, because Indian Ocean is where the playground is. The traffic of oil from Middle East to China will have to pass through the littoral states of Indian Ocean. So the US, of course, they want to have their say also in that region. And this is where I told Tun Mahathir, we do not want to make enemies with China. So do not, and I think he understands that. He is not stupid in this matter. And for us to really balance China, we need to bring their friends along in our ASEAN equation. This is why I think Vietnam is quite smart. Vietnam brought in Russia to balance China because they are very close to China, right? And they have historical tension with China being neighbor, like Thailand as well. So that's why in APEC we have Russia in the picture, and Russia as well under Putin. He understands the future will be in the east. That's why he is developing the Far East, the Vladivostok region, and hopefully because Tun Mahathir has very special relationship with Putin as well. When Putin first became president in the 2000, he learned from two old grandmasters. First is Lee Kuan Yew, and second is Tun Mahathir. That's why he able to control Russia what it is today, very authoritarian. So I believe there will be a synergy if we were to bring Russia into our mix, either through trade. Again, I don't think Malaysia could afford to bring any foreign powers as our defense partner. But for trade purposes, I think that will be more possible. Once we have that kind of party into our diplomatic circle, I think we will be able to balance China efficiently rather than belligerently.
You talked a lot about containment, China's influence, and keep reining that in. But what does that look like? What is the worst case scenario where China has free reign over the region? What are their intentions? What's their end game?
China is a civilizational state masquerading in nation state form. Remember this. They are very much different than all of us. We, Malaysia, we think post-1957, but for China, they are national history, although there were disruptions in the period. They trace back their genealogy to the Great Dynasty. So when we talk...
Broken up by the humiliation.
Yes. So the 100 years of humiliation, you're right. So what China tries to do, based on my reading and also the views from many other scholars, like Martin Jacques, when China rules the world, they are trying to restore the old order, old regional order, in the sense that prior to the arrival of the colonialists like Portuguese and the Dutch, the one who protected ASEAN states then was actually China. It is something that we have to accept. We are under China's hegemony, regional hegemony. And for us to rise up as Asian continent, we also need to depend on China because they are the leaders of the pack. And China just want to assert their dominance. But they're not going to be like the US in the sense they're going to use their IMF or World Bank to set the policies that are favorable to US. Because US have their own liberal understanding about international organizations. But China, they will only give you assistance, but they will not tamper or dabble into our internal affairs. But there's caveat in that. We all know China is very friendly towards everyone, irrespective of your governance mode. If you are a kleptocrat, they would oblige to give their assistance as well, as long as they could secure the national interest. That's what happened to Angola and Malaysia under Najib Razak.
Venezuela.
Yeah.
Venezuela.
And Venezuela, yeah, they don't care less about your political stance. But they also can be a very nice partner in the sense how they help other African nations like Ghana, who are very much democratic and follow rule of law. So China is someone who would like to assert their place in the region, and we should welcome that actually.
Yeah, I was actually one of the products of the Look East policy for Korea. And we do understand that there's a need to look at policy 1.0 and then now it's 2.0. But don't you think that we can't keep looking at them? I mean, at some point we need to stop that, okay, we are actually equal or even better. So what do you think about that? Because I don't think, I mean, there are things that they do very well. I mean, looking at the development of the country, they don't have any natural resources, war torn in 1950s, but they actually developed from scratch, I would say. And then what's behind that was hard work, good policy, and then good governance within the country. So what do you think we should, I mean, yes, we will continue with 2.0. What's the crux of the policy could contain?
Again, the environment has changed tremendously since Tun Mahathir's last tenure as a Prime Minister. Now we are facing with a very different environment with respect to economic progress. For example, the Industrial Revolution 4.0, where automation will become a major part of our industrialization. And since, especially about the Malays, we are still lagging behind Industrial Revolution 2.0. How can we really bypass that development ladder with respect to this policy? This is why I think I don't have the answer. And we need to really, Azmin, we have to answer to Tun Mahathir what is the best way forward to really expedite the maturing process for our GLC, especially if they want to become a real, like China's state-owned enterprises, which is everywhere now in the world, acquiring when they, for example, when they went to Germany to acquire a big chunk of Daimler's share. Do you think it is pro bono or something without having a proper grand strategy with regard to the economic policy? No. Again, it's to acquire that high-tech technology in the Daimler infrastructure. Like what? When they acquire Proton, they really want to acquire Lotus. That's the real gem in Proton. So for Malaysia to really follow Look East Policy 2.0 by looking at our past, I think is quite challenging, because Tun Mahathir is someone, though he's very smart, but he is still a leader of the previous generation. Meaning to say, he needs to be guided by someone younger with respect to how to reorient the implementation of this policy. The spirit is good, we can't deny that, the spirit is good, but the meat of the matter must be deliberated further by experts, like yourself, who has experience working or studying in the East.
Okay. So in the discussion on Look East Policy 2.0, I was just thinking whether his earlier espousal of the Asian values, does that play a part here, and how does it fit in, or whether he has expressly said that it will not be revived.
Okay, 2 minutes.
He did not say anything about this thus far, but from my personal engagement with him, I think he still holds on to that. Yeah. So how he going to implement this second time around, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Just quick one. Having access to his thinking, I think one of the strong critics on Look East policy is that the failure, I mean, we want to be like the Japanese, but the failure of sending the students who are studying the culture, the politics, the economics. You only send them to do engineering. So you won't get the engineering, the advantage that you without the cultural perspective of Japanese back in Malaysia. But the fact is we're not sending them. So what's the thinking there? Do you have any ideas on that point?
I agree, although Prof. Aziz was in Japan for quite some time, right? Yeah, about 1%. But I think the real challenge is not really about us not sending our scholars there, but I think in Malaysian context, I think the challenge is how really to reform the Malays at the grassroots level. I think this Tun Mahathir admitted he failed. After 22 years in power with all that iron fist, he cannot transform the Malays. And what happened to Najib is a reflection of Malays actually. So this is where I think we need to think collectively as Malays obviously. How best can we move forward? If we cannot follow the Japanese, what else can we do actually to role model? Thank you. Lukman, you want to say something?
So basically back to your hypothetical, not back to your hypothesis at the very beginning that Look East Policy 1.0 was probably or possibly a culmination of number one, Mahathir's motivation or intention to resolve the Malays of the Malays, or number two, to rebrand Malaysia as a country. Do you think the same hypothesis applies this time around, or is that a third driving factor this time around?
I think for yes, the two immediate or previous drivers are still there with respect to reforming the Malays. Although PPBM as a party itself is not really properly being articulated in terms of its ideology. So we do not know what actually PPBM wants to do with the Malays. You know, what kind of narrative, Keturunan Melayu, Maruah Melayu, I'm not sure. Although I'm part of PPBM setup. That's a big question mark. But I think under Tun Mahathir, suffice to say, he would of course fall back to his familiar work, which is Malay Dilemma and Look East Policy. For that matter, it's quite relevant. Secondly, yes, I think there was a report in the Star 2 weeks back. Tun Mahathir mooted the idea to to rebuild or to create a new proton. I'm not sure how would it be feasible in the moment, but the point that he tries to make in that report is by stating that it's not about the car actually, it's about creating a Malay industrial class to galvanize our industrialization, which I think under Tun Najib and Pak Lak did not really happen. There's not much continuity. So Look East Policy could be about that as well. Thirdly, it's about China, really. It's about to balance China in Malaysia. How to make us less dependent on China with respect to foreign direct investment. Yeah.
Is there a closing question?
Actually, you got one more. You mentioned it's not about the Quad, Japan, and a few other allies. Is it possible if Malaysia just align themselves just to Japan rather than all these other allies?
Possible bilaterally, but again, at the current moment, I think multilateral cooperation with respect to defense is very much important for Japan, even Japan, because they alone cannot fight China if they want to fight. And knowing America, the US, the way they work is through multilateral cooperation. So if you were to align with Japan, definitely we fall into their Quad in a very large degree or a small one. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Exception, yes.
Just question. So we are talking about Look East Policy and Japan, but recently I actually read about Japan, and then Japan actually has like two very big problems they are facing right now. Like one, Japan is having like an aging problem, aging population, because nobody wants to give birth, and then they are getting married at very late age. Yeah. First problem. Second problem is that they have like overwork problem, which is like most Japanese are overworked until death, and then they think it's something to be proud of to work until death. Not only that, according to statistics, they actually have the highest countries in the world where basically the government has to force the workers or the employees to stop working so long by enforcing them to go back early, for example, during Friday, like 3 p.m. to go home already. And compared to like every country, like you have a certain amount of holidays per year. Japan is the countries where a lot of all these like workers actually do want to take the holidays off. But interestingly, they are considered not very productive in the sense that they work overtime, but they are not actually that productive. So compared to that, I'm not sure whether look-is policy is a good thing. And then also related to that is the attitude of the Japanese, how they work themselves, the attitude and the values that they put high bar on versus the values that, for example, the Malays put high down on. Are there any differences between those values where they upheld, and could this be actually influence the economy of a country?
Well, I personally do not view Japan as, or the look-is policy as a panacea for Malaysian or even for the Malays. In the past, they cynically told Tun Mahathir, why don't you look at Islam instead of look-is policy? But I can understand the strategic nature of Tun Mahathir's thinking, because if we were to ask the Malays to look at Islam, maybe say look at the Arabs, yeah. Definitely we cannot imagine what sort of progress that we should have in our socio-economic strata. So Japan is a stopover actually for Malays to really view, okay, Japanese value is actually Islamic, cleanliness, diligent, hardworking. Actually, the reform that the Malays should really look is actually at the values the Quran and the Prophet have taught us. But the problem with the Malays, they need help to visualize their future. So having Japan as our stopover is a good mitigation plan, I must say.
Because we have to remember that Tun Mahathir doesn't want to copy Japan, just want to import the good things from Japan.
Yeah.
Agree.
Okay.
Okay.
We're gonna have to close for now.
Okay.
We can discuss it later. But with that, thank you very much, Marisa. So.